Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, as it faces enormous pressure to cut its budget, the French government under fire from women's groups over its proposal to slash maternity leave. Also, why having a baby girl in China is no longer taboo, and how Bolivia's indigenous women are overcoming discrimination to enter university. But we begin in France, where a belt-tightening government is now targeting maternity leave. They're proposing that parental leave be shared equally between the mother and father. The Social Security Minister says it's a way to promote equality, but the reality is most men simply won't take up the option. Therefore, it may save the government millions of euros, but it's infuriated women activists, as Jay Barker reports.
After the birth of her fourth child, Anne was keen to spend more time with her kids. So she decided to take parental leave. But it wasn't just a choice, it was also a necessity.
From a financial perspective, we looked at how much it would cost us in babysitting charges, and we quickly realised that all of my salary was going to go on that.
Like all French women, Anne was allowed to take up to 3 years' leave, being paid €530 a month by the state. But families may soon have to bid au revoir to this system. The French government is proposing sharing the 3 years equally between mother and father. The changes have been billed as a way of promoting gender equality, but many men say they won't be willing to put their job on hold.
No, I wouldn't have taken parental leave. That wouldn't have been my ideal life, even though I wanted to have children.
Women groups argue the move is a thinly veiled austerity measure. Knowing that men won't take up the option of paternity leave, they estimate the government would save up to €500 million.
The government knows the father can't take parental leave when he earns more than his wife, or when he works as a tradesman or a shopkeeper. A baker won't close his bakery for 6 months, let alone 18 months. So the government knows that fathers won't take the 18 months, and that's how they'll save money by not paying the parental leave at all.
So how would France measure up to other countries if the proposals do go through? Better than the UK, partners there can only get up to 2 weeks paid leave and 26 weeks unpaid. This will change in April next year, though, where parents will be able to share 12 months of leave between them. Sweden was the first European country to establish parental leave in 1974 and is still one of the most generous. Parents can take 480 days between them, 390 of which they receive 80% of their salary. Germany reformed its system in 2007. Parents can take 14 months, with 2 of those exclusively reserved for the father, receiving 67% of their net salary. This German dad says these days people take a different approach to childcare.
It's a different world. Many of our friends have changed their ways. I wouldn't have believed that 20 years ago. Politically, things are different too. Those who stick to the classic model, the woman at home with the kids, the working father, they're not as widely seen.
Well, the so-called daddy quota seems to have worked in Germany, with a 21.5% increase in fathers taking parental leave since 2006. The question is, if French fathers are offered the same, will they take up the option?
Jay Barker with that report. Now to China, where a population gender imbalance is causing the government to worry. According to statistics, China is missing some 30 million women, which means by 2020 there'll be about 35 million single men in need of a bride. It's a direct consequence of the one-child policy that led to families preferring boys to girls. But the shortage of women is now beginning to change attitudes among younger people. It's a story that's being covered by Marie-Claire, and in cooperation with the magazine, I'm joined now by their reporter, Emmanuelle Eyles-Duwat. Emmanuelle, thanks very much for being with us. Now, under law, medical staff are not supposed to tell parents the sex of their child when they go in for a scan. So how do they get around it?
Basically, they establish a code with the doctor, and if he raises an eyebrow, it means it's a girl, or if he doesn't, it means it's a boy. And there's also ways around writing the reports, and they change the punctuation. So there are ways of knowing whether it's a boy or a girl, although it is now absolutely illegal to abort if you're pregnant with a girl.
Now, why are things changing?
Because the whole country is changing. It's the country of contrast. You have 1 million millionaires and you have 99 million people living with $1 a day. The whole country is evolving. You have now more people living in the cities than in the countryside. That happened just last year. It's industrialized. It's, you know, it's growing fast. And the skills, the rural skills, which were so important with men, are no longer that important. In work, you know, in factories and workshops, women work just as well. And also it is very expensive to raise a boy, because once you have a son, you are expected to pay for his studies, buy him a flat in which he will live when he marries. Whereas if you have a girl, you don't have to pay for anything. You know, she basically marries and moves into her new husband's house. So it's cheaper to have a girl. And girls have become rare. They've become special. They're more caring. You don't lose them when they get married. You know, they stay in the family. They look after the children as well as the sons do. So the whole mentality is changing.
And I imagine because the country is becoming a middle-class aspirational society, you need two people in a household earning money, don't you?
The priorities have changed. You know, the priority is no longer to have a son. It is to find work, find a job, find a flat, find a wife. And then, you know, only then you think about the gender of the child you're going to have. And it is no longer as important as it used to be. The priority is no longer there.
Now, you spent a lot of time with a particular family, and it's very clear in your story that the father very much adores his daughter.
Yeah, absolutely. There is actually an old Chinese saying that's quite sweet that specifies that daughters are their father's ex-lover from a past life. And
is that really?
Yes. So, and I really saw that sort of happening, because the men are just in love with their daughters. They fuss over the daughter much more than they do over the wife. And
does that create an unhealthy dynamic?
Actually, I thought it might, but it doesn't, because the women are really happy, because the little girl keeps the man at home. He who used to go out and come late from work and dinners and stuff comes home. He checks the water temperature for the bath. He's really involved. So actually, it doesn't.
Now, you also notice that there's a sort of change of attitudes between generations, with younger people much more accepting of sort of the equality of women.
Absolutely, yeah. And it was interesting to witness that, because in Chinese apartments, you usually have the in-laws that also live there. And the attitude of the in-laws to the little girls is still not quite, you know, the way it would be towards a little boy. Whereas the young people are completely open. A girl is special. She's rare. She'll attract attention. She's a source of pride. It's completely
She's
changed.
almost become a princess as a result.
Yes, she has.
Now, given the fact, as I just said earlier, we're going to see in 2020 a shortage of women, to the point where 35 million young men are going to be struggling to find a bride. What has been done to reverse that?
Not that much, actually. What they do is they tend to import brides from Korea or stay single. And now with the ratios changing and, you know, the number of girls being equal to the number of boys, this will slowly change, hopefully.
Thank you, Emmanuelle. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. And you can find Emmanuelle's story in the November edition of Marie Claire France, which is out now. And of course, the magazine is, by the way, celebrating its 60th anniversary, and it now has some 33 editions around the world. Moving on, Bolivia is becoming more accepting of its indigenous population. Young indigenous women are now pursuing higher education and don't have to abandon their braids or their traditional skirts, seemingly in order to do so. Nicholas Rushworth has more.
Nancy is in her last year of medical school in the Bolivian city of Sucre. The daughter of a farmer, she'll be one of the country's first indigenous young women to qualify as a doctor. And she is still an exception. Though indigenous people make up the majority of the population, higher education has only been readily accessible to people in cities, mostly descended from Europeans. Universities now help poor students. Nancy gets financial support, but still has to fight prejudice against her traditional braids and clothes.
Other students told me a few times, you should dress differently, you should wear trousers. Why are you keeping your traditional skirts? Our clothes don't make us more or less intelligent, do they?
An anti-discrimination law came into force in 2010. Nancy says she can see attitudes towards the indigenous population changing, slowly.
We used to think we would be discriminated against, and that it was better not to go, and that fear influenced us and prevented us from getting a higher education.
Perhaps the major turning point for Bolivia's indigenous population was the victory of Evo Morales, a leftist from the Aymara nation, in the 2006 presidential election.
There have been a lot of changes. The rural population migrated en masse to the cities. Society is more accepting of people as they are, no matter their religion or the way they dress. I think it's the result of the country's evolution in terms of integrating different cultures in the cities.
Nancy is the top student in her class and hopes to become a pediatrician. Meanwhile, she's a pioneer in race relations in what was, for generations, a divided society.
And that's it for this edition. If you'd like to comment on what you've just seen, please head to our Facebook page. That's France 24, the 51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. Thanks for your feedback so far, and please keep those comments rolling in. Until our next program, bye for now.